Hello and welcome to another edition of Community Forum. My name is Joseph Feaster. I am the host of the program, but I am joined by three other distinguished panelists who we've been talking about the 100 days of the Biden administration. But today, as we tape this program, is the 160th day, and we want to cover a number of things that have occurred during these 160 days of the Biden administration. I want to introduce my other panelists this morning. One is my dear friend, Steve Kelley, my fellow co-host on Community Forum, who is an author, a professor, an entrepreneur, and just a good guy all the way around, has done much here in the town of Stoughton. Joining us as well is Lisa Flashenburg. She is the office manager at KC Real Estate. She's a legal assistant. And as I read in her bio, she's been a chef and a restaurateur. And so you'll be hearing from her this morning. And last but not least is Colonel retired Norman Katz, retired from the United States Army Intelligence Communications Agency, served in the LBJ and the JFK administration. So good morning, fellow panelists.
Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
Yeah, great to have you here. And we've been talking on two prior shows about the Biden administration. And so we're going to continue that conversation today. There's much to talk about, but we're going to start with what's going on here domestically, and then we're going to go international in some of our discussions. And I know that we have a bunch of viewpoints on here. So we agree to disagree and not be disagreeable. For our viewing audience, none of us are declaring any particular political affiliations with regards to that. Certainly we have our views on things, but we're not declaring that. So we're having a conversation, and we want to share with you our thoughts with regards to what's going on in the Biden administration. So let's talk about some of the things which have been in the news. We know that there is much discussion going on about the infrastructure bill. There's much discussion about the filibuster. And of course, even most recently here in Massachusetts, in Winthrop, we had a situation in terms of murders with gun violence. So gun violence has been on the table as well throughout the country. So let's take any one of those three. And I'm going to start with you, Steve. Any one of those three topics or all three that you may want to comment on, feel free.
All right. Well, let me break your rule and start with something else than those three. But what I'd like to talk about is something very, very important to all of us. We just had a building collapse down in Miami. And I'd like to talk about the bipartisan effort that President Biden's team has put forth. Florida is known not to be a Democratic state, and yet FEMA has shown up and has complete support from the Biden team. And they're doing, I don't know if it's a great job because it's such a difficult job to try and help that community recover from that building collapse. But I just want to applaud the bipartisan effort to get boots on the ground down there, determine what the causes of that huge problem is. I mean, that could have affected any of us. I mean, having relatives visiting in Miami or whatever, and to see the FEMA to go in to a Republican state under a Democratic administration and just really fully push forward is a joy. It's part of the mending and the healing that I think the country needs. So I'll start us off with that.
Well, why don't we just take it? In fact, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I thought about possibly of speaking about that, but I think that I would like to have us just take a moment of silence for those persons who have been afflicted, experience that. Certainly that could happen anywhere in the country, but it happened there. They've already had recovered 9 bodies as of last night, and there's 150 something people who are missing. After 4 days, I'm not sure this is going to be a search and rescue. I think it's, more than that, they're just not saying that. So why don't we just take a moment of silence, pray for those people and their family, and just acknowledge that. So Steve, thank you for raising that. So we can just take a moment of silence for that. Thank you very much. Did you want to respond to the other questions on as far as what's is on the table right now before the Biden administration, the infrastructure bill, filibuster, gun violence, or do you want me to move on to Lisa?
Um, I think there's so many things. There's also the international things that are going
Well,
on.
we're gonna get there, Steve.
Yeah,
Come on. If you wanted to host
the
the
gun-
program,
No,
I would have let you
I'll
do
defer.
it.
I'll defer to anyone. That's fine. I'll defer to what topics that are hot for other people. So go ahead.
Okay, Lisa, would you like to comment about the, what's going, infrastructure bill, filibuster, gun violence?
I think there's a lot of discussion on all of that. I don't know how much we're moving forward on any of it. Sometimes I feel that there's a lot of distraction back and forth, and that there's not a lot of progress made. So I know that there was talk back on the infrastructure bill. President Biden pulled back a little bit from some things that had been said about whether he was going to move forward or not. And hopefully that does look like at least the first piece of it is going to go through, which is important, because I think we have to show the American public that as a team, this country can move forward and get something accomplished, other than the emergency COVID stuff that's been happening, because I think that no matter what, that would have had to move forward. But I do feel like the government has to really work together, and, which brings this whole piece back to bipartisanship, the pros and cons about that. I feel that, people want to see bipartisanship, but there's so much political play about that, especially we're going to go into re-election season, and everybody's current seated people in the Senate and Congress are more concerned about money raising and getting reelected as opposed to moving together as a team. And with bipartisanship, if they do something like that, it's very hard for them to kind of take a stand back and switch sides again. Like if you're working together, it's very hard to be, I'm just Republican and I'm just Democrat. And a lot of negativity is what kind of has been fueling everything in the past. So I know that's kind of a lot and broad, but that's where I'm at.
It's very difficult to accomplish anything when you have such a divided, Congress and, House of Representatives, the Senate and the House of Representatives. No one wants to let go of anything. They may tell you that they would like to discuss it, and they may act, in a positive manner. However, when it comes time for discussion with the public can see, to me, it appears as though they just want to get reelected, and they'll tell you anything that you want to hear and do what they feel that they have to do or want to do to get reelected as we get closer to the 2022 election, and obviously getting a majority in the House and the Senate, instead of being split the way we are right now.
Well, in terms of final, and I appreciate all of your comments, and I think that Lisa, you summarize it in terms of a way, but I want to take each one of the pieces and at least give my impression of them. I will say I am disappointed with the progress, because quite frankly, but for the emergency legislation that was passed, the good work around COVID, not much more has been done. And when we start talking about some of the international things that Steve wants to go to, we will talk more about that. But for instance, the infrastructure bill, that was touted as if it was going to be passed within the 100 days. We're now 160 days as we're taping this program. There's still discussion. There's been some movement away from some of what President Biden had put forth initially. They bifurcated the issues. And I'm not sure that even some of the Democrats are going to support it. So we're nowhere close to the resolution of that issue around the infrastructure bill. The filibuster. We know that the filibuster has a very torrid and long history, and how it has been used historically and how it has been changed historically. As I talked about it in our last program, where I said, just trying to help folks understand, the filibuster used to be that you, and I'm sure you know this, Colonel, that what you had to do if you're going to filibuster, it had to filibuster with a filibuster. You be there, you had to remain on the floor in order to be able to do it, and you could not even leave. And once you gave up your whatever you want to do, you can read War and Peace, you can read whatever you wanted to do, but you had to do it from there. Now you can filibuster from home and not even have any of that. So we need to look at those rules. And then lastly, this proliferation of guns in this country, we're just finding, even as we do this program, we're finding situations where there has been significant gun violence throughout the country for whatever reason, if by whom. And this is something we said we were going to touch upon, trying to address the proliferation of guns when we had the different school shootings, Columbine and otherwise, and we have done nothing. So those are some of the issues domestically that we're dealing with. And since I've laid that out, if any of you three would like to, comment on that, fine. If not, then we can move on to some of the international things.
Well, I see, if I may speak, Joe, I see, and I kind of monitor right now, based on my background and position, the dark web and what they're saying. They're going to take your guns. They're going to take your guns. So people are arming themselves more than ever before. Gun sales, gun parts, still ordering ghost guns. That's very, very, very now present and in the way of fixing anything. They're not going to take your gun. No one ever spoke about taking the guns. They say what they want to do, this administration, is enforce laws. An ordinary citizen and civilian does not need an automatic weapon in their home. You don't have to go hunting with an AK-47 or an AR-15. I mean, it's common sense. And people all over the country are too fast now to react with a gun instead of shaking things off. You look at someone funny, they'll shoot you. You're walking in the street, they just don't care. They will shoot you. It makes it more difficult for police. It makes it more difficult for Black people. It makes it more difficult for Asian people right now. And where did this all start? 2016. I mean, it's been around for a hell of a lot longer than that. But it came to the forefront in 2016. We do have, and we have to admit, all people won't admit it, we have systemic racism in this country. And I heard recently that someone said, the Black people are going to take over this country. And someone answered the person who said it, well, if they have more people and more voters, the Blacks, Latinos, and everyone, the more people, the more votes, that's our system. And that's all well and good. But so this is what the voter suppression, these issues coming from the southern states, the Midwest, this is slowly creeping up. They're going to try to take over the votes. So that won't happen. Eventually, it won't be in my lifetime, but that's how it's going to be.
Let me just go in charge of, Norman, as all three of you are very, very thoughtful, and you've raised some additional issues, and which I would like for us to speak about. One is the police reform. discussion that's going on, because that's in the national purview. And the other one is this election reform. I'll call it that for lack of a better, for being very judicious this morning. So any comments, thoughts about that, Lisa or Steve? Norman has raised some issues. And any reaction?
Well, I would just like to say, listening on the way in today about bringing it very local, the shooting in Winthrop this weekend, the description of the shooter was a highly educated male in his late 20s who had a license to carry a gun. Now, whether he had, it's unclear whether his gun was legal or not. And he went crazy, stole a van and shot people. They're now finding that his background maybe has racist overtones to why it played out the way it did. But to me, it's like, here's somebody that is supposedly he met all the qualifications of society. He had the license. He was educated to understand, supposedly, what the outcome of shooting is, and went crazy anyway. And I think one of the commentators was talking about, which kind of goes back to what Norm was saying, is this innate sense of anger that is everywhere. And I feel like that is really something that needs to be addressed, this underlying anger that's everywhere. Either people don't have an outlet, they don't know how to handle it, they don't know what to do with it. And so it's quick and easy to pick up a gun because it is easy access. And while I am personally, I don't really think there need to be guns out there, but I don't want to take anyone's rights away from what they have. But I do think that there has to be something done with the complete ease and access that people just, like, that's the answer, as opposed to talking something out or finding a better path. It is too easy to just pick up a gun and use it.
Steve, any thoughts?
I'm more about questions than thoughts. I just feel that there's a level of hubris in the atmosphere, and hubris being the antithesis to humility. And I think that's the root of sort of the anger that pervades our society. And I'm more questioning, like, where's the hubris from? Where is it that, and let me discuss it this way. So I didn't know what I was going to be till I was 42. Okay, so somewhere in 20 years of owning my own business, working very hard, I still didn't know my own answers. And yet we have virtually everyone telling everyone else what they should be doing. I mean, I barely can control how I should be handling my life. And I'm really not surprised now, but should be surprised that so many people think they have all the answers. They know what you should be doing. And how do they even know what they should be doing? I mean, I've owned my own business for 46 years. I've been a professor for 20 years. I've written a couple of books. I mean, I have some accomplishments, and I'm still pulling back from saying what you should be doing. And yet, what I see is virtually everyone telling you and you and you what you should be doing. And I think that hurts. That's something that we have to kind of come to, like, what is causing that, the hubris, what is causing that ability to dictate with such surety the answers? And I think that's like the discussion I'd like to see. Like, so I hope maybe you can run off of that a little bit. That's where I am.
Well, let me just pick up on that as well, as I think I get a sense of what you're saying. But being a political science major as I was, you talk about society, and in society it is going to be, if you go back from Locke, Aristotle, and all of those Rousseau, and all these political theorists of the times, any society is going to have rules, and there's always going to be somebody who is going to set what the rules are and what one must follow. So it's that discussion, I think it sounds like to me, Steve, that you may be talking about, is how can those who are making these rules, how they're making the decision. It goes back to what Norm and Lisa both said, that, I think the attitude has been, and this extends prior to 2016, how we viewed Congress. Congress had one of the lowest ratings, and I think they still do, as you begin to look at it, simply because the belief was they weren't doing the will of the people, they were doing the will of wanting to get reelected. And I think that that's been one of the things. So the question there is whether you talk about national government, local government, state government, somebody is making the rules. But let me throw this out to you, to the three of you. Do we think that there's been a lack of civility? Is that part of the issue that's going on? A lack of understanding, a lack of, of working with my brother and my sister. Have we lost our sense of civility in society? Anybody?
I can hear Steve, and I understand where he's coming from. That, let me hit that first, Joe. That growing up, and even in midlife, a lot of people really don't know what they want to do in life. Maybe they had the wrong occupation, or maybe they went into the wrong field, and you become entrapped, and it becomes too late. And very few people can get out of that situation. So you blink and you finish out what you have to do. I take myself, for example. Growing up, I was accepted to Yeshiva University to become an Orthodox rabbi. I rewrote Broadway shows and was a choreographer and dancer. I weighed 128 pounds. Whoever thought, when I got married, that my wife and I would end up in the White House and being, in the military in the White House, and involved with the Secret Service, involved with the CIA, involved with the continuity of government. I ended up becoming a super cop. Never understood that. And ended up, when we come out of the Army, working at the family business, which was on Central Street in Stoughton for many, many, many years, while still on the side taking part in local politics. Was on the Board of Selectmen of the town of Sharon for 32 years and police commissioner there. And now here on Cape Cod, I serve on the board. I'm still a public speaker on the Kennedy administration, the Johnson administration, Secret Service, CIA, and what have you. I still have the ability. Your memory is still there. But I really didn't know what I wanted to be. To follow up on Steve's remarks.
Well, what about the civility? My sense is Colonel, you spoke about the fact that there was a shift in the attitude, in terms of exacerbated a viewpoint that took place come in 2016 and on many different divides. What would you say if one said, well, do we have a lack of civility now in society that needs to be addressed? I ask you, and I ask Lisa, and I ask Steve that.
I think so. It was always there, but it raised its head in the prior president's administration. People were afraid to talk about it. However, since then, it has come out, and everyone seems to be talking about it from both sides of the aisle, and from those who are totally, independent and uninvolved. People are afraid of each other.
Lisa, Steve, any thoughts before we move to the international?
Yeah, I've sort of been doing a little historical research on some of this, and I think divides have always been there. Obviously, people always have opinions one way or the other, and it doesn't matter sort of which issue. But what of interest is, and I think about it through my lifetime, things were much more local. When I was younger, politics was local. People were more involved and in tune to their community as to what was happening. And then as the national news, it was there, but it started taking more and more precedent. And now, you really think about it, everything is national. There's very little local news that you hear on a day-to-day basis, unless you're picking it up, here and there. Everyone's focus is on this national, and people have lost touch. I really feel like people don't really have a good sense of politics or how politics works. I mean, I live in Stoughton, and I have to really look to figure out what's happening because it's not knocking on my door. It's not on the news that, the community, local events that are happening. And so it's very easy to become detached and very easy to be like, okay, I'm going to latch onto either group A or group B. And if they happen to be focusing on negativity as opposed to the positive events, I'm going to focus in on that. And so then it just exacerbates this whole thing of not being civil to one another and not actually listening to discourse and just really focusing as I'm either going to be A or B, and there is no in between. I would like to see a return of getting back to being involved in your local community and aware of what's going on in your state, taking a precedent over what is happening nationally.
Steve, anything?
Yeah, I'm listening to germinate my own ideas. I'm enjoying the various viewpoints. Yeah, still working hard on questions, not really having the answers yet.
Okay. Well, I don't think any of us have answers there. We have opinions, and we would love to know yours if you wish to share them. But again, I just feed off of prior comments that have been stated. And Lisa, what you raised there. Do you think that the social media is having an impact on that disconnect, if you will, from our local? Because I mean, for instance, now if you turn on the news, here's how the news seems to go. It's the fires, the murders, the disasters, local news for maybe 2 stories, national news about 5 stories, sports, weather, and you're gone. Mm-hmm. That's the newscast. Do you think where people are going, many, and it may not be, say my age group for one, you're reading everything you're going online. And that's where we start talking about. So do you think that social media is having a way in terms of shaping some of these viewpoints and how people are reacting?
Well, it is in the sense that, first of all, everything's a soundbite, and sensationalism, it always takes precedence. So it's always going to be the murder, the fire, the disaster that will be first. But the piece about social media is the analytics put you in your like groups. So if you have a certain particular group of friends that do a certain hobby, and they all happen to be Democrat, then that is the news focus that somehow gets put into your feed. If you're a gun advocate, those are the feeds that get pushed towards you. It's just the analytics, the way the Facebook, the Instagram, everything works. So you may be getting your news from social media, but you are not necessarily getting a world viewpoint or a local community viewpoint. You're only getting a specific focused viewpoint that is being pushed at you by the advertisers.
So, okay, well, let's move on. We now, as I said, we're 160 days into the Biden-Harris administration. We've talked about some of the pressing issues that have taken place over our 3 shows. We've talked about the response to the COVID pandemic. We've talked about police reform and on past shows. We've talked about the election issues that are going on around the country. We've talked about the gun violence today. We've talked about the filibuster, the infrastructure bill. We can talk about the George Floyd bill and the John Lewis voting rights bill that's going through and really not going to get anywhere because of the filibustering. But let's go across the pond and also in this conversation as we transition internationally. We'd like us to talk about it, and I'm just going to throw them all out, and so we can just have a round robin discussion. We can talk about the economy and where we think the economy is at the present time as a result of coming out of this pandemic. I would like us to talk about the views about the G7 summit. And if we have time to talk about the relationship with Russia, Iran, and China. So those are all the issues, folks. I'm just throwing them all on the table. Grab the one you want. I'm not going to go to any particular person. Somebody speak up.
All right, Joe, I'll jump in.
All right. Love it.
Okay, so the economy, Joe. Having just come back from just a couple of 2-day trip down to Hyannis, it was striking that there's a help wanted sign on every business's door. It's exceptional to see that there is not enough help, and trying to understand why, trying to understand that where is the gap? How is the gap being created? It's a tester. I see people do those crossword puzzles. This is a puzzle of another whole dimension of how did we get to a place where there's not enough people willing to work or available to work, might even be a better estimation of the problem, so that every restaurant, every gas station, every convenience store, every small business, carpentry, plumbers, there's a premium being paid in the medical community as well for people that shift nurse shift people that run the shifts. It's just conversations with people in my small circle who are struggling mightily with just no way do they have access to the people to complete their task in the economy. So that, to me, I'm really like driven to try to explain it to my own self, and then maybe you guys have ideas. How do we get to a place where you just don't have enough people to fill the jobs?
Do you have any sense of why, Steve? Before you go, I just want to ask Steve, do you have any sense of why that's occurring? Any view, anything I've heard? Let me just throw out one and we can discuss it or not. We're saying one was the fact that people were being provided through unemployment with the additional dollars, that may be stymieing that. And as you notice, certain states have now eliminated the giving of, I think it's $300 or whatever it is for unemployment. Do you think that that's it? Do you just think that, folks just don't want to work? Do you have any sense of that? Because it's across the board. I mean, folks are paying bonuses to people to hire. I wish I was in the marketplace in terms of get a bonus in order to hire. Yeah. So what do you think might be driving it? Any thoughts, Steve?
Well, I think I'm going to give you like two sides of this, at least. I mean, it's multidimensional, but so first, there is the government intervention that was designed to stimulate the economy. That is certainly playing a role. But there's something else that I have not been able to understand well, and that has to do with people's work ethos, the desire to perform and to perform something well, as opposed to just to pass the time. Life's purpose seems to be not being addressed by people en masse, not like young people, not old people, but like there seems to be something missing, and I'll lump into that, which is another discussion, but just throw it out that there's an unappreciation, there's a lack of appreciation for where we already are, that is also feeding all of this unrest. Like when you drive down the street, it's easy to not recognize that somebody planned that road, somebody paid for that bitumen, somebody decided whether there'd be a sidewalk or not. And all of that's been swept under the rug as part of this ethos issue that is this lack of appreciation. And how does that, I'm trying to sense and roll into that. How does that all play into not wanting to work if you don't have to, accepting the government because it's a good idea, that the government interventions? I'm just, maybe I don't think well enough. I just can't seem to combine it all into an edible sandwich. Can't do it.
Well, it's all complicated. Norman, Lisa?
Yeah, Steve, you think you're, there's no doubt in my mind, you're a thinker. And some of the younger people today don't want to take the responsibility. Mom and Pa will take care of us. We'll get, we'll get everything. I mean, so if I don't look for a job, so if I don't care, if I don't look to get an education, that's seems to what I observe. It's a way of life, and it's expected. That's how I'm going to live. However, down on the Cape, as you said, you were here for a couple of days. Every single store, mostly the retail industry, restaurants, retail stores, yes, people coming, all have help wanted signs. Now, years ago, just a few years ago, we used to bring in foreign students all over, wanted to get a visa or a visit to be able to visit the United States and stay here for a summer and get a job and work. It's gone. There's no one here anymore. No one is here anymore. Several restaurants have closed because of it, and they depended on that business, the motel business. A lot of the motels and hotels that are down here. No one wants to do that work. And it seems that the kids who are coming over from the foreign countries, for the short time, get a work visa or something, just to stay here for a while, kept this industry booming. The prices on the Cape are skyrocketing for living, accommodations, and anything. You can't get help. We had a girl wait on us at our own local restaurant here Saturday night. It was her first night. She's from Nebraska. I says, well, why did you choose the Cape? Well, she says, I live in the Midwest, and my family, they grow soybeans and corn and everything else. And wouldn't it be nice to spend a summer working on the East Coast where you can get the beach and everything else? She says, it helps broaden my education. And she's in her second year in college. Well, that's good, but you don't see a lot of kids doing that to work. They live off Ma and Pa, and they live off whatever stimulus they seem to have obtained. And these stimulus things have to stop.
Well, what I want to do in terms of Lisa, if you want to comment, I will, because I want to get in some of the international, because we have about 20 minutes or so, and I wanted to do that. But Lisa, if you wanted to comment on either the comments by Steve or Norman, feel free.
Well, I do think the stimulus definitely caused issues. I know just for my condo association, we could not get lifeguards this year because in the past they have been international. And when we went to every local agency, kids were able to get unemployment and basically told all of the places that they got paid better to stay home. So that was a huge piece of it at the start of the summer. I also think a lot of these retail positions, they are low paid. And I think people being home have realized that maybe I don't want to work overnight, or maybe I don't want to work so many hours standing on my feet with very little benefits. And, which brings us back to the whole corporate infrastructure. There used to be benefits. I mean, even when I was first starting in restaurants, you would get a bonus if you stayed a certain amount, or if your sales levels were whatever. And over time, those are gone. So there are, working for retail, essentially maybe occasionally you get offered something with insurance, but you've got a job that pays low with no insurance. There's no real future in it. There's no guarantees for anything. So why, there's no reason to be aligned to a specific company, where certainly when my parents were coming up through the ranks, they could get attached with a company And if they stayed with the company, they would get a retirement out of it, or they would get stock or something. And I feel like most companies have managed to do away with that, and you're on your own. So there isn't a big incentive to go back to a low-paying job.
You know, it's interesting that you raise on 2 points, and then I do want to move over to the international. I can think about when I was an attorney with Prudential Insurance Company, and it was a matter of a piece of the rock, and it was a matter that you felt, just like you said your parents did, that if you would retire from there, you felt an affection, if you will, for the place where you were employed at. That has gone. On the most part, on both sides, both from the employer standpoint and the employee. And then lastly, we have tried to address that here in Massachusetts with certain laws which talk about part-time employees have to have certain benefits. So there are some things that are trying to address that, Lisa, to get back, because yes, when you're making, we're talking about the minimum wage being $15 an hour. $15 an hour is not going to allow you to be able to do much and to establish that loyalty. And just think about some of those jobs you're talking about. They're paying them a little bit better now because they're incentivized, because they need the people that both Steve and Norm have talked about. But in any event, we'll have it for another day. What do you think about what went on? Okay, we have a new administration. There seems to be a different esprit de corps that's going on in the international relationship between the U.S. and its allies. And there was just a recent G7 summit, and as my observation, it was a love fest with the United States. What do you think about where we're heading with regards to post the G7 summit and with the meeting that President Biden had with President Putin? Is on the table. Anybody pick it up?
The most important thing that I observed from watching, and I watched just about every minute of it, was the acceptance of each other and the realization of how small the world really is. And even if it was a love-in, it stated something that we did not have in the prior administration, and which is good. And I go back many years to the example of the coldness between Putin and Biden. It wasn't, they were there. And I remember the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis when I was in the White House that night, and how close this country really came to a nuclear holocaust. And my wife wasn't with me at the time.
Well, help our people, our viewing audience, just on this, because that was Khrushchev that was the president at the time. Just to put it historically, so people will know.
Exactly. It was early 60s. And I said goodbye to my wife. And I went with my neighbor next door. We went to work together. He was also a military officer. And he said goodbye to his wife, because we knew right from the top how close we were. And I remember a meeting of the executive committee of the president, and they were voting of whether we should attack first or wait until we get attacked. It was just unbelievable. And President Kennedy said, I think I should talk personally. He should talk with Nikita Khrushchev. And Norman was the one who got him on the line through the White House Communications Agency. They spoke one-on-one. Neither one wanted a nuclear holocaust. Kennedy knew that Nikita Khrushchev wanted to save face. He did have missiles. We have visual proof of it, actual proof, 90 miles off the coast of the United States. By them speaking together, Kennedy said to Khrushchev, the missiles must be removed from Cuba immediately. Nikita Khrushchev stated that, well, if I take those out, then you must remove your missiles from Turkey. Now, Khrushchev had no idea that the missiles, the United States missiles in Turkey, didn't work. So Kennedy said he would take them out immediately. The next morning, the Russian ships started to come in. We allowed them to cross, he drew a line in the ocean, drew a line in the sand to start taking the missiles out. And the United States started to dismantle those missiles in Turkey by talking it out. And it was 50 years later that I sat with Dr. Sergei Khrushchev. This is Nikita Khrushchev's son, who emigrated to the United States and was a professor at Brown University. He since passed away. He says his father looked tough, sounded tough, banged his shoe at the podium of the United Nations and whatever, but he didn't want a nuclear holocaust. And he liked Kennedy and says neither did President Kennedy at the time. He says he was a
Norman, let me just stop because we're running out of time here, and I think the historical piece is great to put it in terms of context. But I want to hear from Steve and from Lisa on your views of the G7 summit, the Putin-Biden conversation. How did you view that in the context of looking at it based upon what the relationships were over the past 5 years? Steve, Lisa, either of you?
Go ahead, Lisa.
I think this was more about making America's presence felt back in the world and trying to repair relationships. Like you alluded to it as a love fest. I don't know if it was a love fest. I think it was more about visibility and saying we're here and we're not going to be in a back burner and we want to participate in world communications. I don't know how much got achieved by that, other than good, it looked better to everyone's constituencies back at home. I think that Biden has a certain view of the world, and I don't know if everybody's on the same page. And so I think that has to be worked out as to, I think everyone wants to move forward in a certain direction, but of course, every country is coming at it from a different perspective. And I'm not sure everybody's on the same path forward.
What do you think about the meeting with Putin?
A necessity, because you have to show strength and standing. And I think you had to change the relationship. But like certainly President Biden's viewpoint is very different than President Trump's viewpoint. And so he had to kind of like, this is my path as opposed to the other path that we were on. Again, I don't know if it really achieved anything other than to just set the imagery for both sides to be, to look friendly, but to be like, hey, we're doing our own things.
They say, stay tuned. Steve?
Oh, I'm always reminded that of an old saying that, when you shake hands with that person, you count your fingers when you're done. There's this sense that way underneath everything that I'm seeing, I'm being spoon-fed. So I'm uncomfortable taking any strong position that has validity for me. I don't think as a very small part of the picture I'm tiny, minuscule, very, very small, that I have good information. I question the information that I'm getting in the media. And back to the social media piece, I think that it's awful that people rely on that. I think that's an even smaller veracity to any of it. So I feel like we're scratching the surface of what's really going on with what we're being spoon-fed. So I'm not sure that I can opine with any kind of footprint of information that makes sense. I'm watching, and I'm more an intuitive person. I get the feeling that I'm not being given the quantity, the quality, the accuracy, the recency, the relevancy of the information that would make my opinion have value.
Well, let me just in terms of, well, well, let's just give my take on it, and I'll come back to you, Norman, in a minute.
Yeah.
My I heralded what took place at the G7 summit. We had been far removed from the U.S. presence on the international stage over the past 4 years. There seemed to be a disintegration of the respect for the United States as being a major player in international relations. And I know we won't have time here in terms of to talk about China, which has emerged as a strong and superior force in the world. We won't have an opportunity to really talk about Iran, but the ability for we and our allies to seemingly come back together because we had a nationalistic focus as opposed to a broader worldview in the prior administration. So I was happy to see that. So, but like you, Steve, the proof would be in the pudding. Again, I can't, having not sat at the table, not dealing with diplomacy, not being as close to it as Norman has been and is. I have to watch and see what goes on. The meeting with Putin, I think it's important. I go back and I mentioned a piece about Khrushchev just to let, Norman know I was paying attention back in those days when I was in school, that I knew about Nikita Khrushchev and the banging of the shoe on the table at the UN and all of those good things that went on. But it was relationship and what could have happened with the Bay of Pigs situation in Cuba, what could have happened there. And we have a similar situation going on here as far as our elections, as far as the interference with, we've had with our meatpacking industry there. We had the situation in terms of the some of the other businesses. We've even had situations with our schools in terms of the hacking. And a lot of it has been demonstrated that it has come from Russia, and that was addressed. So I think, if nothing else, we've laid down the gauntlet as to what their expectations are, whether, like you say, Lisa, whether we have a forming of a positive relationship or whether we're emerging back into the Cold War with Russia, time will tell. But these are the types of issues. So your intuitiveness, Steve, your skepticism maybe that we need to do, it's a wait and see, and we'll go forward with that. I know, Norman, you want to get in. We have about 5 more minutes, so I just want to let folks know that's where we are, and then we'll be closing out. Norman?
Well, Steve is right. I always respect, his point of view and his observation. Sometimes you don't know who to believe, Steve. If you watch the news, I mean, they tell you it's straightforward reporting from the White House or someone, and it's colored, but it's colored on all sides. When you see lying outright, you see them say one thing. I personally saw a senator say one thing, and then his interview, he said, I never said that. If to be blunt, it kind of pisses me off. Tell the truth, but we will never hear the whole truth from everyone, nor will we ever know the capabilities of our country and other countries. As it comes to defense, as it comes to discussions, everyone is holding a poker hand. And like you said, you shake hands with someone, often you got to count your fingers. But history will tell you, watch your back, respect everyone, but and we never forget, you can apologize, but never forget their names. I mean, I'm the youngest, the only one still alive in the world from my generation that served and did what we did at the White House. So I can speak from the march to Alabama, John Lewis and Martin Luther King, and I lived through all that and observed and did things and did work for the government and served my community. So I come from an old age perspective. Do unto others, what you would like done unto yourself. And sometimes I feel maybe I know too much. I did it and keep my mouth shut.
Well, no, we know you're not going to do that, but as we come to the close of the program, I want to give Steve and Lisa to give some parting comments. We have about 2 minutes. Either one of you, before I close out the program, before I do that, I want to say thank you to each of you for participating in these 3 shows that we've had. I want to thank our producer, Roy Cohen. As I mentioned on our last program, we have a new station manager, Mark Lindy, who has joined us, and we may be getting back in the studio soon. And I want to thank Rob, who has been working with us on this program. So as we close out, any 20-second comments, Lisa or Steve, that you'd like to give us before we close?
There's a lot of things that we need to be paying attention to, and I'd like to, I think the racism and voter rights are 2 things that can be handled with local impact, and people should be paying attention to that.
Thank you, Steve.
That's tough to beat. Nice conclusion there, Lisa. I want to thank the audience that's out there, hopefully having some part, and then just try. My sense is that if we can gain a little more edge in the ground for humility versus hubris, we'll do better.
All right. Well, again, thank all of you for participating. Thank you to panelists. Thank you to our viewing audience. And we will see you next time on Community Forum.